Before this story even truly begins, I want to ask you for something simple but meaningful. Have you ever met someone who made you feel like the only person in the room? Take just 1 second. Subscribe to this channel. Not because it boosts numbers, not because it feeds the algorithm, but because stories like this aren't just meant to be watched, they're meant to be felt. Some stories entertain you for a few minutes. Others sit with you long after the screen goes dark. This is one of those stories, and once you hear it all the way through, you'll understand why I couldn't tell it any other way. Not polished, not exaggerated, not dressed up to impress, just honest. Because confidence isn't what most people think it is. Attraction doesn't work the way movies sell it to us. And real connection, the kind that actually changes people, doesn't come from trying harder. It comes from something quieter, something deeper. And if misunderstood, something dangerous. So, what is the one thing most people get wrong about attraction? People used to look at me and assume I was confident. They thought it came naturally to me, like I was born with it. Like I walked into rooms already knowing where to stand, when to speak, and how to hold attention without effort. They believed conversations naturally bent in my direction. That people listened because they wanted to. That I never questioned myself. Never replayed moments at night. Never wondered why someone's interest faded halfway through a date. They were wrong. Painfully wrong. What they never saw were the quiet hours after those dates ended too early. Me sitting alone on my bed, phone glowing in my hand, refreshing message threads that suddenly went cold. They never heard the silence that followed. Laughter that felt forced. They never noticed how often I blamed myself for things I couldn't even explain. My name is Emily Carter, and for most of my 20s, I didn't feel invisible. I felt overlooked, and that hurts more. I wasn't unattractive. I wasn't boring. I had friends, opinions, a life that looked perfectly fine from the outside. But whenever I felt something real, whenever I wanted someone to feel something back, something always collapsed quietly between us. Conversations stayed polite. Dates ended early, with gentle excuses. Text slowed, then stopped. No confrontation, no explanation, just distance. And that distance felt personal. I watched other women do it effortlessly. They laughed and men leaned in. They spoke and men remembered tiny details weeks later. Meanwhile, I replayed everything. Every sentence I said, every smile I gave, every pause that felt too long or too short. At first, I blamed how I looked, then my voice, then my clothes, then the way I laughed. I changed outfits, changed my hair, even practiced laughing differently, softer, lighter, then worried it was too little. Nothing changed because what I didn't understand back then, what no one ever teaches you, is that attraction doesn't come from impressing someone. It comes from how they feel when they're with you. But I didn't learn that from a book. I learned it from a man who barely spoke. His name was Daniel Brooks. I met him at a friend's birthday dinner. He wasn't loud. He didn't dominate the table. He didn't tell impressive stories. He didn't try to steal attention. Honestly, if you weren't paying attention, you might not have noticed him at all. And yet, people gravitated toward him. Men respected him instantly. Women leaned closer when he spoke. Even strangers trusted him within minutes. I watched it happen in real time, and it unsettled me. By the end of the night, something became clear. Daniel hadn't talked much about himself. He didn't perform. He didn't entertain. He didn't try to be interesting. Instead, he asked questions, but not polite questions. Not what do you do questions. He asked questions that made people pause. Questions that made them search for honesty. And when someone spoke, he listened. Not waiting for his turn. Not interrupting, not drifting. When Daniel looked at you, it felt like the room softened. Like time slowed, like you mattered. Period. A week later, I ran into him again at a cafe. I don't know what came over me, but I asked him directly, "What's your secret?" He smiled gently. Then he said something that permanently rewired how I understood human connection. Most people are so busy trying to be interesting that they forget to be interested. That sentence stayed with me. Daniel explained something no one had ever articulated for me before. Connection doesn't come from performance. It comes from presence. People don't remember your words. They remember how safe they felt around you, how seen, how understood. When someone feels emotionally recognized, their body reacts before their mind does. Their shoulders drop. Their breathing slows. Their smile becomes real. It isn't manipulation. It's biology. I became obsessed with understanding this. Not in a dark way, not in a manipulative way, in a desperate, self-improving way. I read about psychology, emotional intelligence, attachment styles, presence. But more importantly, I practiced. I stopped rehearsing what I would say next, stopped trying to impress, stopped performing. I started listening to feel, not to reply, and slowly, almost invisibly, everything changed. Men didn't react dramatically. They reacted differently. Conversations lasted longer. Eye contact lingered. Laughter felt natural, not strained. Some men told me things they'd never said out loud before. Others said something that surprised me every time. I feel calm around you. They couldn't explain it, but I could. I learned to mirror emotions, not words. When someone spoke with excitement, I met their energy. When they slowed down, I slowed with them. When someone shared something vulnerable, I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it breathe. That's silence. The one most people are terrified of. That's where trust grows. And then there was Michael Reynolds. Someone who used to intimidate me just by existing. This time was different. I didn't perform. I didn't overthink. I stayed present. I asked about his childhood, his fears, the things he wanted but hadn't admitted to himself yet. And when he hesitated, I waited. At the end of the night, he looked at me and said something I'll never forget. "I don't know what it is," he said, "but I feel like I can breathe around you." That was the moment everything clicked. The power was never control. It was connection. And with that realization came something heavier, responsibility. Because emotional presence can heal or it can harm. And once you understand how deeply your presence affects someone, you can't pretend it doesn't matter. After that night, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt quiet, thoughtful, humbled. I noticed things I'd never noticed before. How people relaxed mid-sentence. How truth surfaced unexpectedly. How people opened without planning to. And with that awareness came restraint. Not every connection needed depth. Not every spark needed pursuit. That was the real test. There was a man named Ethan. He wasn't falling for me. He was falling for the feeling of being understood. So I stepped back, softened the intensity, set boundaries. And when it faded naturally, I felt relief, not loss. That's when I knew I'd changed. The irony was undeniable. The less I tried to be desired, the more unforgettable I became. The less I chased connection, the deeper it formed. People started saying, "You seem confident. You seem grounded. You seem different." I smiled every time, because confidence didn't come from attraction. It came from respect. And here's the truth no one tells you. Real confidence is quiet. Real attraction is patient. Real connection is respectful. And when you offer someone that, even briefly, it stays with them. Not because you tried, but because you were.